All right. So here we go. I feel like I should... Yes. What color? Blue. Yes. I want to reiterate how impressed I was, how well you guys kept it together when we went over the notes on Uranus. I thought at the very beginning it would, I thought there'd be a lot more reaction, especially at the beginning when I talked about the probe that was going in. But you guys really held it together nicely. So, props on that. But no worries if you would have laughed. I totally would have understood. So, the moons of Uranus are a lot less interesting than Uranus. You can kind of see some of them that we're going to be looking at here. They're just big circle rocks, basically. They don't have a whole lot going on. None of them have atmospheres like Titan. None of them have water that could be just below the surface like Europa. These are pretty uninteresting worlds. But we don't want to diss them too much, because after all, they do have something that no other moons of any other planet have going for them, and that's that they orbit vertically Uranus. All the other moons, of course, orbit in the plane of the planet's orbit. So, you can see there's all sorts of different moons here. As with the other planets, we're going to focus on what I found to be the most interesting four. Of those, Ariel is the first one. You're going to want to make sure you do know the order. So make sure you write down that Ariel is the first relevant moon from Uranus. And you can see a close-up of Ariel right there. And if you know anything about like Shakespeare and stuff, you might recognize the name Ariel. Ariel comes from a mischievous, airy spirit in The Tempest. So you can write this down too. Another way you could say a mischievous, airy spirit. A lot of times they're called like fairies and stuff. I never saw or read The Tempest. Does anybody? No. Okay. Take that, Shakespeare. So, size is 720 miles. You can skip that. Although I will have you write down the diameter of some of these moons. Not this one. This is what the surface would look like if you were standing on it. Kind of a neat little view. You can see that Ariel is not the first moon of Uranus. It's the first relevant moon. This moon right here would be the very first one. But we're not looking at that because it's even more boring than this one. You can write down that it's cratered, rocky, and icy. Another nice place that you could bring some ice skates. I had a weird dream last night that I was in the NHL. I played for the Sharks, but they played their games in the Boston Bruins facility, so it was interesting. Anyway, it was very vivid, too. It was like I woke up and I was like, wow, when did that happen? So, a little bit more about the surface here. This is actually probably a little bit better picture of how big Uranus would look from that moon. Another interesting picture there. Any guesses on what is inaccurate from this picture? Yeah, the sun is a little too big and bright, and the rings would not be visible. The rings are so faint that you'd have to be like right on top of them to actually see them. Now, what I'd like you to write down from this is just the fact that Ariel has the biggest, amount of surface features of all the moons of Uranus. It has the biggest variety of surface features. Write that down. So if you're walking around on Ariel, it's a couple cool things. You know, you'd weigh a heck of a lot less than you would here. You'd probably be able to jump about 100 feet in the air because, you know, it's only 700 miles across. So it has very little mass and very little gravity then. But yeah, you'd notice a lot of different characteristics on the surface. And this is different from most of the moons of Uranus. Now, one of the other things that we talk about on each of these moons is some of the more interesting things that are associated with their surface. For this one, write down Kachina chasmata. It's probably the biggest surface feature that you'll see on Ariel. It is the big scar that runs across its forehead.
Do we need to write like miles long?
No, just write down Kachina chasmata. The other cool thing about my dream is I could actually fly. That was awesome.
You're a flying hockey player.
I sure was. I remember it was so weird. It was so vivid. Because in Boston, they have a whole lot of banners up top from the Celtics and from the Bruins. And I was like flying around at the top of the Boston Garden. It was so cool by the banners and stuff. Oh man, that was a cool dream. I hope I have another one like it tonight. So, you can actually see this is an interesting shot taken from the Hubble telescope. You've got Uranus in the background. Ariel is right here, and this is the shadow that Ariel's producing. So you'd have a little bit of like a solar eclipse if you were on Uranus. Umbriel's next. You can write that down. And you can probably guess what the surface feature is that we're eventually going to talk about on Umbriel. It's way up top there. So that's the second relevant moon from Uranus. And you can write down the history there too. Being a teacher, I feel like I should know what this poem is about, but I have no idea. Anybody know? Like, what is the lock? And what are they looking at?
The reflection?
I guess. What? I don't know. I guess that's a question for Mr. Mickle. And you can kind of see the theme with the moons of Uranus then. They're mostly named after, like, fairy-type creatures. So the size of Umbriel, 727 miles across, another small world, just like Ariel. You don't need to write the size down. The surface is cratered, rocky, and icy. You can write those down. It's really not that bright. That's the artist just decided to draw Uranus that way for some reason. Not a particularly good representation there. The only surface feature that you're going to see on Umbriel, if you're walking around, is craters. So you're going to want to write this one down too. So in terms of the surface features, Umbriel has the least amount, and Ariel has the biggest variety. So you want to talk about Wunda crater here? I suppose if you're German, it would be Wunda crater. I think. I don't know. How would you say it? Wunda. Okay.
Yeah, ask the
So Wunda or Wunda crater. You don't have to write down how big it is. And that's the biggest feature that you want to make sure you remember is with Umbriel. Just Wunda crater. You don't have to write down the size. So there's a little zoomed in picture of it. If you look at it right, what do you see there? You see a baby?
A horseshoe.
A horseshoe? I see a horseshoe. What else do you see?
I see Cookie.
You see Cookie Monster?
No. Wait, actually, yeah, I do.
Really?
Yeah.
Where is he? Is this his mouth?
Hold on.
I see
Redraw. He's like right there, and then that's his eye.
Oh, I could see the argument for that.
So
Wow. Yeah.
that, I mean, I don't know what Cookie Monster looks like. It looks like that, but
Cookie Monster.
he looks
Yeah.
like a cursed Cookie Monster. He's just like,
Nice. I like it. I like it. The first thing that came to my mind was a heart. I kind of see a little heart here. Kind of along with the hoof.
he's eating a
He's eating a heart. Eat your heart out, Cookie Monster. You don't have to know this for the quiz. I could see the oven there. All right, Titania is next. Third relevant moon from Uranus. I'll see where we go with this one. This is one of those note-taking sessions where it's okay to go off on tangents because there's not a lot of notes to take. From this picture, can anybody guess what the one surface feature
That thing right there.
crack on the right.
Yeah,
right here?
yeah, that's shiny.
Yep. That crack is going to be the main thing that we have to think about for Titania here. You're just going to keep going with the... So Titania is the third one. Another thing you can write down here. Well, I'll just say the main thing with all of these mythology things here, make sure you see the pattern. Make sure you see that a vast majority are named after some sort of fairy. You don't have to remember where it's from. If you want to cross those out, feel free. So you got like an airy spirit, which is basically a fairy. You got a fairy from the last one. And now you've got Queen of the Fairies. How about Midsummer Night's Dream? You guys do that in school?
No. I've heard of it, but no, we don't do it.
Okay. Well, you can see the fairies here. There they are. And there's another one. So the size is 979 miles. You need to know this size. The reason for that is Titania is the largest of the moons of Uranus.
Wow.
I think they're all cratered, rocky,
They're all
and
the
icy,
same.
aren't they?
Yeah.
You can skip that one. You can skip this too. Again, the main thing that I want you to remember about the surface features is remember that Ariel has the biggest variety and that Umbriel just has craters, and you should be fine after those. But you do have a nice little mix of things if you're walking around here on Titania. Of course, as you guys figured out from the very beginning, this big crack going down Titania is called Messina Chasma, and that's what we have to make sure that we know from this particular moon. You don't have to write down how big it is, just write down the name.
Wait, so this chasm, like, basically the entire
Yeah. And remember that the distance is a diameter. It would go straight through. So the circumference would be quite a bit larger than that. So it's not going to wrap around the whole moon, but it goes quite a ways.
Oh, yeah.
Oberon is the last one we're going to look at. Any guesses on where this name comes from?
The same spirit. The same one over like people.
Yeah, so Titania was queen of the fairies. Oberon is the king of the fairies. So, again, you don't have to write down the thing here, just king of the fairies. That's Oberon. And we're not even really into fall yet, and I already still miss the summer weather. Yeah, a lot of people aren't big fans of summer. How many of you guys... Let's see what your favorite seasons are. Have I asked you this yet?
No.
No.
Probably not.
How many people their favorite season is summertime? That's me. How many people your favorite season is fall? It's a good amount. I like fall too. How many people like springtime the most? How many people like winter the most? A few. Nice.
I just like the world.
That's actually my order too.
Spring is Ow! Spring is like
It is. I hate spring.
It lasts spring lasts so long.
Yeah. Spring is like, it's just a big joke, really. Spring is winter playing a joke on you. One day it's warm, and you're like, oh yeah, spring's here. It's going to get warmer. And then, yeah, then it snows for prom. Okay. You don't have to write down the size, but as you can probably, okay guys, listen up. As you can probably guess, because this is the king of the fairies, it is one of the larger moons. It's not as big as Titania. Apparently, the Queen of the Fairies is more powerful than the King. But you have a pretty big size there. Surface, cratered, rocky, and icy. Imagine that. Surface features craters and canyons. Skip it. And that's a nice little view there. So, if we were listing the moons in order of Uranus, what would this moon be? The closest.
Ariel.
Yeah. What would this moon be? The second.
Umbriel.
What would this moon be?
Titania.
And what would this moon be?
Oberon.
Oberon. Oberon. Alright. The one surface feature we're going to look at here is the Hamlet crater. Why do you suppose they call it the Hamlet crater?
It looks like a skull.
It looks like the skull from Hamlet, exactly. Crystal skull. Write down Hamlet crater. And I don't know about you guys, but when I look at this, it really does look like a skull. You've got like the sunken eyes there, you got the nose. It curves in like on the cheekbones. Creepy, creepy, creepy. What's the famous saying from Hamlet? To be or not to be? I kept... Yeah, yeah. And you can write this down too. So again, the idea here is, the fact that Uranus orbits and revolves vertically is a huge problem for the idea that the universe came about as a result of the Big Bang, and you have the gas clouds that are forming and spinning and stuff, because everything should be spinning the same direction. And the idea then is that something came along and knocked Uranus over. So it's spinning the wrong way. And the idea is that its moons are the remnants of the giant asteroid that did that. The problem is there's not enough mass there to cause Uranus to move even just a little bit. So that doesn't really work.
Bless you.
Can we see the moons of Uranus from Earth? No, 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 and no, unless you have a gigantic telescope. I don't have one this big, but if you've got a telescope that large, you're going to see something that looks like this. So yeah, this is the moon of Uranus we didn't really look at. That is known as Miranda. So yeah, one extra thing that I want you to do in your notes. I said that you don't need to know the plays and the Shakespeare stories that they came from. Make sure you know that Ariel is from the play The Tempest. That one's important, because that's a pretty cool title. And there's your family portrait. Or Miranda.